You're listening to Spiritual Growth Tools on the radio, helping you understand the blocks you have in your life to being happy, with a wide variety of guests to help you better understand the problems you're having in your own life. Whether you're depressed, poverty-stricken, suffering ill health, or confused about how to take the next step, discover products, services, and information that will enable you to grow with grace and address issues that are preventing you from happiness, health, or abundance. Go to spiritualgrowthtools.co.uk and find out what's holding you back.
Well, hello everyone, and you are listening to Spiritual Growth Tools on the radio, where we discuss spiritual growth, what that means, and how it can help you to move forward through the blocks that you have to health and happiness. I am your host, Caroline Nettle, and today's guest is Nouk Sanchez. Welcome, Nouk.
Thank you, Caroline.
You're so welcome
to be on the show.
Thank you. That you're here today. Thank you for coming on. So for those of my listeners that have never met Nouk before, she is from Take Me to the Truth. It's a book that she wrote with Tomas, Undoing the Ego, which is a not-for-profit organisation, and they aim to help people recognise and undo the one cause of all suffering, the ego, which is another way of saying fear. So they provide resources, education and mentoring, and their intent is to empower individuals with the means to trust their own divine teacher within. That's one hell of a great intention. So thank you again for coming on, Nouk. I'm so excited that you're here today. So I thought what we could do to start the show is just if you could give a brief overview of what the Course in Miracles is and what brought you to it, that would be great.
Yes, that's a good start. Just briefly, A Course in Miracles is a profound spiritual teaching that came through a scribe, and her name is Helen Schuckman, in the late 1960s. It's a non-dual teaching, and it's aimed at removing all the blocks that we have to the awareness of love's presence. Okay? Because love is the nature of God. It's the nature of our true self, our holy self. There is no fear in love. The love and fear are mutually exclusive. So what this teaching does, A Course in Miracles, is it helps to deconstruct the belief system of fear. In other words, it undoes suffering, which is what we all aim at. But what it shows us there is the means that we've been using hasn't been effective in undoing fear. And it just explains why that is and what does undo fear, all right? Because fear is the nucleus of every conceivable form of suffering we have. So I was led to A Course in Miracles about 24 years ago, in that I deeply, deeply wanted to experience a love that could not be threatened. In other words, I wanted to know love that was unconditional and that would be eternal here, while we're here on planet Earth. And I'd had quite a few relationships by that stage that love had turned to hate. Yeah. And I saw that with a lot of friends at the time, what was happening in the world, that there was just so much conflict and discord. And I knew deep down that this was not the plan. This was not God's plan. Yeah. So what happened was A Course in Miracles was introduced to me around, like I said, 24 years ago. And I asked my partner at the time, Tomas Vieira, to join with me in studying the Course. But of course, what happened was that he was at first quite terrified of what it said, because it challenged his entire thought system. But he eventually came on board and joined with me until 2010, where he developed cancer and passed from the body in December of 2010, which sent me into a spin, to say the least, which I'll talk about a little bit later if we have time. But what happened is during those 20-odd years, Tomas and I really delved into A Course in Miracles. We did it through and through, and we learned of a love that could not be threatened. We had the most amazing relationship, absolutely incredible relationship. And there's a lot of material about that on our website, etc., which I'll give to you at the end of the show. It was, we went from how the Course in Miracles calls a special relationship, which is a relationship that's based on change, okay? And it's a special relationship is conditional, and it has all the components of fear, even though on the surface it doesn't look that way. But a special relationship, whether, especially in this case, a romantic relationship, is a recipe for great suffering when it's left to the ego. And what we learned was the entire process of releasing the special fear-based relationship to spirit, giving it to spirit in order for it to be transformed completely to what the Course calls a holy relationship, or a genuine, unconditional relationship. And this is a relationship that we develop together. But what it ultimately does is, and what it did for us, was it helped us to truly open our hearts and minds to learn about the love that we are, right? So I got to learn through the process of this change in relationship with Tomas. I got to learn who I really was. I got to learn that who I really am is not who I thought I was. And he got to learn the same thing. And this is for everybody, not just for us. You know, we made every conceivable, this is funny, we made every conceivable mistake there was possible in trying to understand A Course in Miracles, especially in those first 10 or 12 years. And because we made every mistake possible, we learned what not to do, okay? And we learned the pitfalls of misunderstanding what the Course means. And our first book that we wrote together, Take Me to Truth, really outlines some pretty powerful practical material about how to transform your relationship from the conditional special relationship to the holy unconditional relationship, and what that might look like, as well as taking people through the basics, practically speaking, and exercises as well, on the 6 stages that people will generally go through as they're awakening spiritually. You know, because most people would know, if they've been on the spiritual path, that it's just, I mean, sure, there are some wonderful highs, but there are also some incredibly dark lows that we reach, where we go into utter confusion. We have no idea where we are. And what we'll tend to do then is believe the ego voice, the voice of fear in our mind, that tells us that we've slid backwards, right? But what I'd like to say here is there's no sliding backwards. Everything is perfect. And in Take Me to Truth, which is the first book we wrote together, it outlines the stages that we go through and the pitfalls that we may fall into, and the confusion we may feel, so we're able to better lift ourselves out of that. In other words, it's a basic roadmap to what the spiritual journey might look like as we're unfolding or unpacking it. So that's what we did. I think we launched that book in 2007, became a bestseller instantly, and it still is a mainstay for people on the spiritual journey, especially those who are wanting to truly undo fear and confusion and truly live out of the love that we are, to find the true self that we are, because that never changes. That's a little bit of background on that. And I think, Caroline, we wanted to talk a little about fear. Is that right?
Well, I just wonder, because I'm not sure that all of my listeners will have even been introduced to the Course in Miracles, and if you haven't, I strongly recommend that you look online. There's lots of videos on YouTube. It's a fantastic book to read, but it is a life-changing course, so it's not to be read lightly. But I was thinking, from the perspective of A Course in Miracles, can we, talk about why fear is there, why we have fear, and ways to combat it? Because I do know, several of my guests come on and they've been through horrendous circumstances and come out the other side. And quite a few of them have used the Course in Miracles. So I know it's a powerful, powerful tool in the spiritual journey. And of course, it's one of many. But so perhaps let's talk about why fear exists and some of the ways that the Course in Miracles suggests that we combat it.
Yes, okay. That's great, Caroline. So I'm going to have to back up a bit before we talk about fear, and we're going to go to talk about God, all right? Now, God is a label, and unfortunately, it's been a much abused label in the world of spirituality, and a much misunderstood one because of that, The God that A Course in Miracles speaks of is a non-dual God, very, very different than maybe many other spiritual beliefs. While I'm at it, let me just say that all spiritual pathways that encourage us to release fear and guilt are extremely helpful, really, really helpful. And this is what A Course in Miracles does. It helps us to release fear and guilt because they are the nucleus of all suffering here in the world. So the God we're talking about, basically, in A Course in Miracles, is a God that is all-encompassing love with no opposite. Now, when I say no opposite, that means there can't be any fear in this love. If there is fear, then we've unknowingly excluded the love of God. So it's very much a non-dual teaching in that it asks us, it aims at actually undoing all the blocks that we have to the love that we are. Because God, according to A Course in Miracles, is not a separate entity from us. We are the children of God. That's what we are. We're the children of God who've basically fallen asleep. So we've left the heavenly state that we've always been in and still are in, but we've kind of fallen asleep and had a dream that we are in this world now that is certainly not heaven. It's more like hell, because there is a persistent sense of threat here in this world, and there are alien experiences here from God. So, those alien experiences, apart from God, are things that we often mistakenly attribute to God. And so, therefore, we are very fearful of God. As much as we want to awaken, we have this dreadful split, unconscious split in our minds, where consciously we want to return to God, to love, but unconsciously we're terrified of God. I mean terrified. I'm not going to, kind of dampen that or dilute it. we are absolutely terrified of God. And I've had many experiences personally, which I write about in my new book, The End of Death, that explain that. We are terrified of God because we don't know the nature or the will of God. We have accepted in the world, generally speaking, we have accepted, a truckload or greater of experiences here in this world and attributed them to God. And those might include any kind of scarcity in the world, whether it be financial or scarcity in love, scarcity wherever, okay? Any anxiety or worry, any need to control or plan, physical pain, emotional pain, sickness, conflict, all of these, and death, even physical death, we've kind of attributed to God. How many times have we heard people say or believe, something in nature went wrong, there was a massive earthquake, and we call it an act of God, okay? Or that somebody may have passed on, and we say that, well, that was God's will. Or they're going home to God, right? Well, according to A Course in Miracles and according to my own personal experience here, is that all of these dreadful things that happen here in this dream, the ego dream that we're having, all of these things are not part of God. God's love that's all-encompassing. They are part of the split mind that we chose to have when we chose to dream apart from God here in the world. So it's kind of a dream we're having apart from God, and the aim of this dream eventually is for us to return, to realize we're dreaming, and that we're dreaming a dream apart from God, and that we are to, and what we really want is we want to return to the essence of love that we really are, through awakening to the truth that is here within the dream. Okay? And that requires a process of undoing the fear that we have believed is part of God, right? So let me just say this, that every fear that we have, regardless of the form of it and how it manifests in our lives, can be traced back to the dreadful fear of love that we have. And when I say love, I mean God's love, all-encompassing love with no opposite. So every fear we have can be traced back to the fear of God, the fear of love. Okay, this is the fear of the totality of the love that we are. Okay, and as I said before, it's unconscious until we begin to exhume it, and this is what A Course in Miracles is for, to help to exhume that fear. All right. Now, why we're so fearful is because deep within the unconscious lay a humongous block of guilt, terrible guilt, because somewhere deep down there we believe that we have left God and that we've made this kind of image of ourselves apart from God. It's called the ego thought system, or the thought system of fear and guilt. And deep within our psyche, we hold this guilt because we know we have made a deliberate decision somewhere, perhaps in the beginning of time, where we separated from God and decided to make our own self-God and the body God, right? And so every fear we have, it comes from this shocking guilt, yeah? And what that means in practical terms is this, is that every time we have a fear, any fear at all, there is a secret expectation of punishment behind every fear. And this is the source of our continual striving and struggling in life, where we're trying to get our own needs met. First of all, we believe we do have needs that are unmet. Yet if we could remember who we really are, which is the God self, or what I call in the end of death, the holy self, if we could remember who we really are and just sit quietly in that beingness, we would also remember that in the love that we cannot be threatened. That in this love that we are totally invulnerable. Even here in this world that seems so full of threat. Yeah? And it's as I said before, it's a process. But I need to make this point clearly that every single fear we have, whether it is the need to control, whether we're anxious, whether we have pain, sickness, scarcity, conflict, whatever it might be, or impending death, is all a very deep unconscious expectation of punishment. Now, what happens with this expectation of punishment is that we believe that it's God. This, like I said, this is unconscious. We believe it's God who's going to punish us. Because what we've done unconsciously is we, through the ego thought system, we have projected the ego's concept of God onto the real God that we're terrified of, who only wants our good and our happiness here in this dream. Yeah. So we've unconsciously projected this a terrible, dual, conflicted God of suffering and death, onto God. And therefore, unconsciously, we're terrified of God, right? So it's caused a deep, deep split in us. And there's, on my blog, and I have a huge blog, and I'll give you the details of that at the end of the interview, but there is a wonderful exercise, and it's called Are You Fearful of God? And it's just it's a short exercise. It doesn't take hours to do, and it will help you to source where your fear is of God, and where it's manifesting in your life. Yeah. So that's something to look at as well. Now, what the Course aims at is exhuming this unconscious guilt that we have, which is the cause of all fear we have, so that we can begin to come back to the truth of who we are, which is the unassailable innocence. That's what we are. We are totally innocent. Everything that we thought we've ever done, every bad thing we thought we've ever done, or anybody's ever done, doesn't even show up on God's radar. It doesn't. Because God doesn't, all-encompassing love cannot see or recognize anything that's opposite. So any conflict or pain, etc., can't be recognized by all-encompassing love. And yet here in this life, what we tend to do is when we're still stuck unconsciously in this fear of God, we will pray to God, or whatever we might call it, the universe or whatever, spirit, whatever. We will pray. If we have cancer, we will pray for the curing of that cancer. If we have scarcity issues, we will pray for more wealth. If we have whatever conflict, we pray for that conflict to be healed. But the issue is, until we advance in our trust in God's all-encompassing love, we will be praying unsuccessfully. Because if I have cancer and I'm praying for God to heal my cancer, it's just not going to be very successful, because God doesn't know about anything that is not God. So that is not the way we heal cancer. The way we heal cancer, or heal any type of suffering here in the dream, is we need to go to Spirit and ask Spirit to help us to forgive our belief that we could be separate from God, from all-encompassing love in the first place. That's what needs healing. The cancer doesn't exist. The financial issues don't exist. The conflict doesn't exist. In truth, they don't exist. So we're trying to ask God to heal something that doesn't exist, and then we get so distraught because it doesn't seem to be happening. Does this make sense, Caroline, as I'm speaking?
Completely. And I'd just written down a question, how can I learn to trust? And I think you've answered it by saying, forgive my belief that I am different from God. So one of the things that came to mind whilst I know I've done a huge amount of healing on myself in the last 7 years, but probably for the last 40 years. And when I was in that black space, I didn't have any ability to even imagine that there was a loving God. Do you know what I mean? Everything was really black and horrible, and I was so stuck in those thought patterns that I don't think I could have even conjured up a loving God. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that a little bit when we're so stuck in because very often things like depression and illness, they can be learned behavior, so we're not even conscious of where they come from, but we can be so stuck in them that listening, now even I'm going to say this, I came to a course with you and Thomas 5-6 years ago, I'm not sure, and I don't think I could hear you anywhere near as well as I'm hearing you today. So that shows to me that I've progressed. But it's just funny to be listening and thinking, I get it this time. I'm sure I didn't before. But yes, if you could just talk to those people that are really stuck in the pain of depression.
Yeah, Caroline, that's good. And I mean this honestly. This a whole section in A Course in Miracles, and it's called the development of trust. It's a process, and it is transferring our trust from the ego thought system, the thought system of fear that the world has here, to the thought system of love, all-encompassing love with no opposite. And it's a process of transferring our trust, and it comes by it involves looking at all the untrue beliefs we have, okay? We need to be able to have them exhumed, brought to the light with the spirit of love, and then we can see them with spirit, and then we can give them over to spirit. You see, the backbone of A Course in Miracles and this entire process of awakening is built on the process of what I will call quantum forgiveness. All right? And it's this quantum forgiveness that heals every single block that we have that causes our suffering. All right? Because before I can go any further, I need to say the ego thought system, which is the self we think we are, is this deeply unconscious wish to be unfairly treated. Okay? I know it sounds vicious, it sounds shocking, but it has to be seen. And, we're not guilty of any of it. We're entirely innocent of it. But we do need to look at it. It's an unconscious death wish. That's what the ego thought system is, being the opposite to the love of God, to the truth we are, the holy self, the innocent and invulnerable holy self we are. So this, as I spoke earlier about this deep unconscious guilt we have, translates to being this death wish, or this wish to be unfairly treated, self-sabotage. Basically, it's deep unconscious self-hatred. All right? That's what it is, deep unconscious self-hatred. And that's the voice in our mind that most of us listen to 99% of the time. Okay? So all of that needs to be gradually and gently undone. and it doesn't need to be painful. It often is painful, but it's only painful because we tend to cling to what brings us suffering because it's so familiar. If only we could go, okay, I have the willingness now to undo this thought system. I have the willingness to undo this unconscious wish for self-sabotage, and I want to do it now. If we could stay with that, we wouldn't need to experience any pain whatsoever. You know, the pain comes from our resistance to love. That's all that it is. So in A Course in Miracles, it talks very specifically about this quantum forgiveness, this forgiveness process. And I honestly, Caroline, I've spent the last, what would it be, probably the last 6 years really asking Spirit's help and guidance on fleshing out this forgiveness process, because it's so profound, it's so powerful, that it literally changes our lives from the minute we begin using it, if we begin using it sincerely, yeah? And this process is in my new book. It's called The End of Death, all right, which is the end of suffering. And I'm wondering, I have the time, I think, if I could just take listeners through the 7-step process while we're here on the radio, and they can always go to my blog or get the book later to print it out. But the process is this. Let me explain it. If we have something that we're very anxious about, worried about, whatever it might be a health issue, it could be a relationship, it could be our financial status at the time, it could be that we're very worried about somebody else. Okay? So let's go through this. The first thing I'd like to say about it is this. It's in A Course in Miracles, it uses a term, and it's called the atonement, okay, which is a very scary word for most people who've had a Christian background, because the word has been so badly abused. And I have to laugh because having a Christian background, traditional Christian background myself, somewhat, when I came across the word atonement, I wanted to run because I was like, oh my God, no, you know. But it doesn't mean what we think it means. According to A Course in Miracles, it's something very different. It's the undoing or the correction of fear and suffering in our mind, all right? Because all fear and suffering comes from our mind, and everything in the world, including our own bodies, belong in the mind. This is the mind that we have, and I'm not talking about the brain. The brain, of course, is a body part, just like a finger or a leg or whatever. We're talking about the mind, the bigger mind that's outside. So everything is in this mind. Everything is a projection that comes from the mind. Now, just to simplify this, imagine the mind is divided in half. Not that it is in reality, but just imagine for the time being. Our mind is the mind of God. We are children of God. And what has happened with the so-called separation millions of years ago was that a part of the mind of God decided that it wanted to be not God for a while and have a dream of experiencing fear, which is where we are right now, and we're waking up at the moment. But this part that was not God, we'll call the ego thought system. And it's returning home to God now. There are certain rules to follow. So when we do the forgiveness process and accept the atonement, which is just accepting the correction of fear and suffering in our mind, what we're actually doing is we're invoking the miracle. This is God's miracle, the Holy Spirit's miracle. When we're willing to forgive and correct the perception in our mind, we are actually opening our hearts and minds to accept the miracle, to clear to correct the issue in our mind, which then is free to transfer to the particular problem in our body, in our relationships, in our finances, wherever it might be, wherever we seem to see suffering or feel suffering, right? So let me take you through. The first step is to apply true denial, okay? True denial. This is God's denial, Spirit's denial, where we remember that there is only one power. There is only the power of God's loving will. God never wills for us to suffer. That's some old wives' tale about God allowing us to suffer and willing for us to suffer. In other words, we have to suffer to learn lessons. May I just say, Caroline, that is bullshit. So excuse my language, but it is never God's will for us to suffer. It's only God's will for us to be happy and joyful, healthy and abundant. That is God's loving will. So it's kind of a reversing that thought that God is here to teach us lessons and we have to suffer through those lessons. No, that's not true. So we remember there's only one power, and that's God's loving will, which is all-encompassing. So we have to remember that. That's the first thing we have to remember, is to deny anything not of God's love, the power to hurt us or to hurt anybody else. It's very, very important to remember that first one, all right? And the second principle is to place cause and effect in their proper sequence, okay? What we do here in the world, if we're thinking and acting through the ego thought system, is we believe that things in the world, the body, relationships, finances, etc., can affect us, all right? So we effectively have this whole cycle arse about, as I say, back to front. Nothing outside in the world can affect us because it's all in our mind. It's all in our mind, right? So we need to learn to reverse the cause and effect that we've come to believe is real, okay? No matter the form of the problem, we have to learn that all cause is in our mind and nowhere else. It doesn't mean we should judge ourselves for that, because the second we judge ourselves, we're allowing the ego's fear and guilt to have its way with us. So it's not about judging. It's just about taking responsibility that if it's affecting us, if we have any kind of emotional charge, then the cause of that is in our mind. It's not out there in the person who's upset us, or in the body, or anywhere else. It's in our mind. So if you believe the cause is anywhere but in your mind, you'll be unable to heal the real cause and its seeming symptoms. So we need to recall that unconscious guilt is self-attack projected outward. There's no one else to forgive except myself, right? For unconsciously using others, the body, the past, or the world to attack us, right? So it's very different way than the world sees it. We need to take responsibility for whatever it might be that's upset us. It's in our mind, and take responsibility for that with no judgment, no self-judgment, right? And the third step is to make healing of our mistaken perception our priority above all else, right? Because the cause is in our mind. So, this is a tricky one. It took me a while to really get this and to be willing to do this. But if I want to heal the cause, I must desire to have my perception of the problem healed more than I want a physical healing or a physical miracle, okay? But, like I said, that's a tough one. But with practice, we can get there. The fourth step is to learn to look past the appearances, of scarcity or suffering or conflict or whatever it might be. We need to look beyond what our physical senses might tell us is reality. Because the ego sends our physical senses out there, it projects it out there to report back exactly what it wants us to see, which is always going to be to confirm proof that we're separate from God's love, all-encompassing love and healing. So, that's a very important step as well. Number 4 step is to learn to look past the appearance of suffering, regardless of the form, and ask the Spirit to show us the truth behind the suffering that we seem to see, right? And the truth will always be healing, abundance, and that everything's right in the world, yeah? But if we don't do this 4th step, and we really do believe that the problem is real, we won't be able to forgive it with Spirit's help. And whatever we can't forgive, in other words, to look past, will come back over and over again, perhaps in the same form, or perhaps in a different form, usually in a different form, to confront us. So eventually, we will get it, to want to heal this at the cause level, not just at the effect level. Because that's what the ego does. It just says, well, I have health issues or I have financial issues. We will go out there and we will try and heal them out there in the world. It doesn't work. And the reason it might work temporarily, but then we're going to be plagued again with persistent sense of threat. The ego thought system just perpetuates itself in a closed circuit, so that we're always looking out there to try and heal the cause of the problem. That way, it blocks us from ever seeing the real cause of the problem, which is in our mind. It's the belief in separation. It's the belief in that we're guilty and that everybody else is guilty. And it's the belief in suffering, right? And the expectation of punishment. So that's why this step, number 4, looking past appearances, is so important. Number 5, the 5th step, is to remember there is no hierarchy of illusions. Everything in this world, and I mean everything, in this dream through the ego thought system, is an illusion. It's all an illusion, right? And the ego loves us to have a hierarchy of illusions. So it tries to make it seem like the illusion of cancer is a far bigger illusion than, say, the illusion of a toothache or a headache, right? So it grabs us emotionally by luring us into this incredible chase of trying to heal or problem solve all of these illusions. So it keeps from our mind the truth, which is that no illusion has more truth than any other illusion. I mean, they're all illusions, for God's sake, So this is what the teaching of A Course in Miracles leads us to, is that to really not just have it at an intellectual level, but to be the true physical embodiment and live out from the knowledge, the knowing that we're safe, that we're innocent, because there are no illusions that have truth to them, right? And this is quite an incredible teaching that we're being led to. So one illusion is never truer or bigger than any other, right? They're all equally illusory. As we accept and practice this principle, we also learn and demonstrate that there is no order of difficulty in miracles. This is the number 1 teaching in A Course in Miracles. There is no order of difficulty in miracles. I mean, after all, when we look back to the original Jesus teachings 2,000 years ago, he healed the sick and raised the dead. I mean, there was no issue to it. Yeah, he performed miracles left, right, and centre, and he did come to teach us that we should do the same. After all, it's in our inheritance, and this is the teaching of miracles. There is no order of difficulty in miracles because there is no hierarchy of illusions. They're all illusions. None of them have any truth. So it's no more difficult to heal somebody from the last stages of cancer than it is to cure a headache when we're talking about forgiveness. Yeah. So one miracle is not harder or more impossible to achieve than any other. By accepting and demonstrating the illusory nature of illusions and the maximal power of miracles, we undo everything that the ego mind made in an attempt to attack us. And the second last step is to accept the healing, is to accept the miracle. And this happens to be one of the hardest steps because we're so accustomed to doing and being responsible for doing and thinking we're doing something through the ego thought system that we find it almost impossible to surrender completely to Spirit's all-encompassing love. And yet this step is very, very necessary. In accepting the miracle, which is called the atonement, we're accepting undoing of the cause of the problem, which is the guilt in our mind and the fear in our mind. So in accepting it, we immediately join with and receive God's certain will for healing. This unequivocally replaces the ego's wish to be unfairly treated, that unconscious wish for self-sabotage. And this is the miracle. No matter where we see suffering, we must accept the miracle for ourselves. If we perceive suffering in another, if we perceive it in the past, it might be in child abuse, whatever it might be, or in the body, sickness, or in the world as war, healing must be accepted in our own mind first, because we see it. If we see it, the perception of it is in our mind. So that's the source of where the healing needs to be. And because this dream is holographic, if I heal it in my mind, I am actually healing it in the minds of everybody. That's why the Course in Miracles is a very quick path to undoing suffering, because the miracle actually collapses time, which collapses suffering. Yeah. So the last step in the miracle process, in the forgiveness process, is to trust in God's love and healing completely. Remember, God's love is all-encompassing love with no opposite. It's already been done. Okay? It's not like we have to pray for God's love to heal. It's already been healed. We have superimposed this dream of suffering over God's all-encompassing healing and love and will. So what we need to do is surrender our need to do or fix the problem. This is this last step. And to truly give over all concern we have about our problem and to accept the miracle, which is to open our heart to accept that it's already done. We're accepting the healing that was already done for us. Okay? Doubt, see, this is it, doubt and trust. We say we trust, but we don't really trust, right? If we still doubt, then we're not trusting, because doubt and trust are mutually exclusive. If we doubt, then we cannot accept healing. So this is the last step in the forgiveness process. And it's a very, very important process. So that's it, Caroline. That's the process there. And very quickly, I have a beautiful prayer that came to me a couple of years ago, and it's a very simple prayer. If we want to really heal something, we can just say, Spirit, help me to forgive myself for whatever upsets us, whatever the problem might be, for using the problem. So, Spirit, help me to forgive myself for using the problem or the person to attack myself. Okay? So, and to separate from your love as my holy self. And it's a very simple, quick prayer we can use whenever we're feeling separated or, confused or attacked or whatever it might be. And all of this is on the website, on my blog, and in my new book, The End of Death as well.
Thank you,
Caroline. I know we're getting short on time.
We are a little bit, but I just want to say that prayer is just perfect. I love that. And thank you so much for putting it in such easy to understand format. And I highly recommend to anybody that hasn't studied the Course in Miracles or who is wanting to start or who has already started. But Nouk's book, Take Me to the Truth, is the first one that I read, and it's just fabulous. And I'm really looking forward to reading The End of Death, because I know the journey that you've been on since Thomas passed and everything, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be really, really fantastic. So, Nouk, do you want to tell everybody how they can get hold of you or where they can find your books?
Yes. I have two websites. The first website is endofdeath, DEATH.com, and on End of Death website, there's some very helpful material. So please go there, and you can download a free chapter of the book there on the materials page, supplemental materials, if you'd like to listen to it. It's very, very helpful. And the other website we have is called undoingtheego.org, and there are hyphens in between the words. So it's undoing-the-ego.org. And you might want to go to Nouk's blog. There's a wealth of incredibly helpful material free on the website if you'd like to read that. And we also have three 4-day retreats coming up in the USA. We have 2 this month. One is in Portland, Oregon, and the other one is in Ontario, Canada. And the last one in November is in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I live. So please go to the events page if you'd like to join us in one of those 4-day retreats. They're very experiential and profound in their capacity to completely turn around where we've been as far as suffering and fear and confusion, to opening our hearts to really let the love in that we really are. So, that's about all I can think of right now. Like I said, there's a wealth of material on those websites. The End of Death is a very important book. So is Take Me to Truth, that I wrote a few years ago with Tomas. But The End of Death is, I don't know. I don't have words for it. You should read the reviews on Amazon, actually. If you really want to find out about it, read the reviews. I think we have 32 or 33 reviews there. So I hope this interview has been helpful. And if you feel moved to read the course or to at least read this material, which is like helpful in explaining the course in very practical terms, then please do so. And I really thank everybody for joining me on this call. And I thank you very much, Caroline, for inviting me onto the program. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much. It's been such an incredible honor to have you on, and I'm sure you will have touched a lot of hearts this evening, so I thank you deeply. So Let's talk about next week now. So next week I have on the show Jacinda Lockett from the Jacinda Lockett Show in the USA. I am excited to chat to her about spirituality and what that means to her and how she helps her listeners to be better people with the message that she carries. On a personal note, I'd just like to inform everybody what's going on with my tree planting holidays, the project that I've just received through Spirit. I'd really love it if you go and take a look at www.treeplantingholidays.com. We've got lots going on with that. I'm just about to get all the sponsorship deals launched and the media, and it's just getting really, really exciting. So if you fancy helping out with replanting some trees in Africa, then please do look at the sponsorship form, because that would be great. And if you've got any questions at all, just send me an email at info@treeplantingholidays.com. Completely shameless plug there, but I am so excited about this project. So thank you so much for listening to us on Spiritual Growth Tools on the radio. Thank you, Nouk, for being such a fantastic guest. And I really love doing the show, so thank you for listening in. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll be kept informed about all the upcoming shows you will not want to miss. So stay safe, and I hope you find the tools that you need to grow with grace this week. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Spiritual Growth Tools live on the radio. For more information, go to spiritualgrowthtools.co.uk.